Okay, in this first video, we're going to be looking at some of the key benefits of economic growth for both material and non-material living standards. So first things first, that economic growth means there's higher levels of production. Okay? It also means there's higher incomes in the economy and there's increased expenditure. So the three main ways we measure economic activity is production, income, and expenditure. If there's an increase in any of those three things, it leads to an increase in economic growth. And essentially, an increase in production leads to more demand for labour. If we're producing more, we need more workers, which generally flows on to increased employment, increased income per person or GDP per capita, and therefore the average person gets access to more goods and services. And that's what material living standards is all about, increasing access to goods and services for people. So benefits for material living standards associated with economic growth. The first one is that there's a strong correlation between increased economic growth and increased jobs. It doesn't always have to lead to more jobs because you can grow but use more technology, or grow because people work more hours. But as a general rule, stronger growth, increased production leads to more jobs and therefore lower unemployment. So an increase in production creates extra jobs, which helps to reduce unemployment rates and allows us to achieve what we call full employment, which is considered to be when unemployment's below 5%. So when growth is strong, firms need to hire more staff to increase their production levels, and this reduces what we call cyclical unemployment. Cyclical unemployment is unemployment that occurs because of a lack of aggregate demand or a lack of demand in the economy. So essentially, economic growth needs to be faster than growth in productivity as well for demand for labour to increase. So if we produce more, but we're only producing more because each individual worker can produce more per hour or they're more productive, then we don't actually need more workers. So we need to actually increase our overall production by a faster rate than we increase productivity so that we actually need more workers. So economic growth as a whole means more production, therefore more demand for labour and reduced unemployment. The second thing is that strong growth helps to increase personal incomes. So growth in production generally leads to an increase in income. So we're talking about wages, interest, salaries, and that's basically because there's extra demand for factors of production. So it's very closely aligned to the fact that unemployment goes down. When there is strong growth, economic growth of around 3% or higher generally leads to unemployment going down. Because basically we need more resources, we work closer to our productive capacity, we hire more of our available labour resources to try and meet that extra production, and that helps to increase personal incomes. So when economic growth is strong, firms increase their production levels, that boosts the derived demand for labour, and that generally leads to higher incomes. So to put that in perspective, the average person that's on transfer income or welfare earns around $300 per week, whereas the minimum wage is $672 per week. So what we're basically saying is that even if you're on the lowest wage, you're still going to earn nearly or over double as much as you would if you were on unemployment benefits. So higher incomes allow citizens to have a greater ability to purchase goods and services, which allows them to satisfy their wants and needs. The first one reduces unemployment. Secondly, it boosts personal incomes. Thirdly, it increases the ability of the government to provide essential services. So what do we mean by that? Is that economic growth creates revenue for the government. So when the economy grows, there's more people employed, which we just talked about. Increased employment leads to more tax. So it leads to more tax in the form of income tax because more people are working. But there's also more spending in the economy and therefore more GST. And the government also collects more company tax during these times. It can also collect some other indirect taxes like stamp duty because more people buy properties, and other payroll taxes. But basically, increased economic growth, increased production leads to more revenue for the government. That revenue from the government allows the government to provide essential services like funding for hospitals, schools, infrastructure, as well as welfare for the needy in society. So these services help to boost material living standards by improving the quality of our capital. So what happens is we grow faster, we collect more revenue. This allows the economy to spend more money on infrastructure and schools and education, and that provides better quality labour and also better quality capital, which allows for us to grow faster in the future. So one of the key benefits for both material living standards and non-material living standards is the extra revenue the government collects allows them to provide government services. Some of those government services boost our material living standards and our ability to grow in the future. And this can also be used for non-material living standards, so like reducing incidents of domestic violence, putting that money towards helping the environment, for example. So stronger rates of economic growth help to improve the living standards of the less fortunate because there's more money available for welfare, and that can help the unemployed, families, sick, the aged, veterans, etc. The increased tax revenue can also be used to reduce incidents of homelessness, drug addiction, problem gambling, alcoholism, etc., which is all issues for the society as a whole. So, in terms of benefits for non-material living standards, so there are the three key benefits for material living standards. We've got the increase in employment, the increase in incomes, and the increased ability to provide essential services. In terms of non-material living standards, when we use the word non-material living standards, we're talking about quality of life factors other than just people's incomes. So, basically, we're looking at things like stress levels, access to clean air, the amount of crime, life expectancies, um, congestion, access to health and education, the right to have a say in society. They're all things that impact people's non-material living standards. So the benefits of growth for non-material living standards, there's a range of benefits here. Basically, often higher incomes associated with higher growth and higher employment can provide individuals with more leisure time because they don't have to work as many hours because they're earning more in the hours they do. Increased incomes give people the opportunity to enrich their lives. So, for example, they might be able to travel overseas. They can do more with their lives that perhaps they couldn't if they didn't have the income or the purchasing power to do that. If we have more money, theoretically, we can spend. We have more money to try and tackle environmental problems. So we can give more subsidies to businesses, for example, to try and tackle environmental problems. We can extend our life expectancies through improved healthcare and nutrition and care. So, for example, people can afford the treatments that they need and therefore live longer and healthier lives. Society can use technology and innovation to eliminate many physical, demanding, or boring jobs. So we can work in more more sort of engaging professions. There is improved capacity to allocate resources to the arts and music and drama. So, if a country doesn't have the growth and the incomes to sustain society, then it's very hard to dedicate enough money to things like the arts and music and drama, particularly from a government perspective. It can also lead to increased employment, and there's a whole range of benefits for non-material living standards associated with having a job. So, for example, having a job is generally associated with better physical and mental health. So, when you have unemployed, there's more feelings of failure, lack of self-worth, and depression. They can be more associated when there's high levels of unemployment. So, if we can create jobs and create more growth, therefore create jobs, then that can lead to less instances of failure and depression and self-worth, issues with self-worth. More unemployed citizens also experience family stress, breakups, and unhappiness. So, again, reducing the unemployment rate can help to tackle some of those issues in society. And lastly, higher crime rates are often associated with higher unemployment. So, by reducing unemployment rates, we can hopefully tackle crime. So, in terms of economic growth versus economic development, to finish off here, economic development refers to improvements in the economic well-being of a nation. So it's not just about increasing production, which is what economic growth is about. It also incorporates non-material factors like increasing access to infrastructure, better education, social advancement. So that might including more women in the workforce, and people's access to freedom of speech, human rights. So it's it's more broad than economic growth. It includes a whole range of factors that impact the overall well-being of a nation. So you should be thinking of non-material things. You should be thinking of the quality of infrastructure, how many people get access to education, social advancements, and people's rights to freedom of speech when you're looking at economic development. So it can also include things like improving working conditions, so not only paying people more, but their overall conditions of work are better, longer life expectancies, less people living in poverty. Economic growth generally helps to improve economic development because the higher production helps the government implement policies that are focusing on achieving all of these other factors that boost economic development. So increased growth, for example, leads to more tax receipts, which can then be spent on healthcare and education, policies to reduce poverty, improving work conditions, reducing domestic violence, improving human rights. So economic growth is not the same as economic development. Economic growth is more simplistic. It's just about producing more. Economic development incorporates a whole range of other factors that improve people's quality of life. So access to healthcare, life expectancies, having a say in society, freedom of speech, basic human rights, better working conditions, all those things are included in economic development. So to summarize, economic growth is generally synonymous with improvements in material living standards. The relationship between growth and non-material living standards is not as clear. So growth, for example, can be associated with rising inequality, increased congestion on roads, pollution, and depletion of natural resources. So while growth has benefits for non-material living standards, it's not always as clear-cut. Rapid rates of growth have also been responsible for things like climate change. So the government's often had to implement policies that will reduce growth, but should overall help to improve our living standards. So, for example, the carbon tax will hurt growth because it increases firms' cost of production. It can also make us less internationally competitive, but in the long term, it should help to preserve the environment and therefore allow us to protect our natural resources, increase our productive capacity, and achieve more sustainable growth. There are also a range of other policies that are designed to boost non-material living standards that may hurt growth in the short term. So things like occupational health and safety laws increase firms' cost of production and may reduce production. Equal opportunity and anti-discrimination may have negative impacts on growth. Excise taxes, gambling restrictions, all these things that limit spending. So tobacco, alcohol, gambling, they're all spending in the economy. So if we're trying to tackle those issues, technically we're reducing growth and production, but they are designed to help boost our living standards. So these policies help to improve quality of life, however, they can hurt economic growth in the short term because they limit production, they often increase production costs, and lead to less production in the economy. Thank you.